Hey, everybody. Thank you once again for hopping on board the latest edition of Gun on One. It is powered by Inside the Birds. Of course, I'm Derrick Gunn. Is it just me, or did the regular season just fly by? They say the older you get, the quicker years go by, and I can raise my hand and attest to that because, man, this season went fast. But now we're in the season of it's do or die, as Hugh Douglas would say, do or die. You one and done. And for this particular Gun on One, I love this guy. I got to know him many years ago. He's not only a storyteller, he's a story breaker for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Been covering the Eagles for 16 years. And, of course, he is the host of Uncovering the Birds podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Jeff McLane, how you been, my man?
Gunner, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man.
How are you?
Good, man. Let me ask you again. Is it just me, or did the season fly by?
You know, when you're in the middle of it, you're like, oh. And then you're like, oh, you know what? That went pretty fast because they click off. And it almost seemed at a certain point that was like, okay, let's just get to the postseason.
Yeah.
Right. They were pretty much kind of locked into that number 2 seed for several weeks. Not officially, but that seemed that's where all the signs were pointing them to be. So you kind of were looking ahead to getting to that point. The team certainly didn't. They handled their business and won all their remaining games, except for obviously the Washington loss there after JalenHurts suffered a concussion. But yeah, you're right. It's a one and done time, and this is what this is where you make your money, right?
I know, man. I love it. I love it. You love it more when the team you're covering extends itself deep into the playoffs. And, the Eagles are sitting in a prime position to do just that. You just mentioned JalenHurts and the concussion. And I let our followers know that as we tape this particular Gun on One, it is Tuesday. The Eagles will practice on Wednesday. You're covering that team as closely as anybody I know. Is there any doubt in your mind that Jalen will be ready to play against the Packers on Sunday?
Well, I mean, there's certainly some doubt because he's got to clear the concussion protocol. But my sense, talking to people down inside the NovaCare complex and some sources close to Jalen, is that they expect him to be ready by Sunday.
Yeah.
That being said, he still has some hurdles here to clear. He's got like maybe one or two less steps to clear before he's completely through protocol. My expectation is tomorrow you'll see him out there. He'll probably be a limited participant, which means he's not completely through the protocol. But the next day he'd be able to practice full. Now, the qualifier here is that if he woke up Thursday morning and didn't feel great, then all of a sudden he'd have to be status quo, and then all of a sudden then I think Sunday comes into question about whether he can go or not. But the anticipation that I've gotten from people down there is that they're expecting him to play. They're game planning for him to play. Obviously, they have contingency plans in place in case he doesn't. But they're hopeful. They just can't say it. Nick Sirianni can't come out and say it because they're kind of restricted by what. Again, these aren't Eagles doctors that are going to clear him. Ultimately, it's going to be an independent neurologist that will clear JalenHurts through the concussion protocol.
You and I have covered this team for a long time, and we have seen a lot of concussion subjects. We've seen those who have come back within a week, and, of course, those like Jalen who have been out extended time. As we go back to when he got concussed, he didn't look that bad. He got up, he gives a thumbs up, goes to the sideline, goes to the blue tent, comes out, has his helmet on, thinks he's going to play. And it wasn't until like the third quarter until we fully got word that he was in concussion protocol. Now we're looking at a little over 2 weeks. Are you surprised that he's been in concussion protocol this long?
No, because, again, every player is different. Every person's different in terms of how how concussions affect them. Sidney Brown's concussion on that opening kickoff a few weeks back looked bad. It looked like there's no way he's going to play the following week, and he was ready by the following week.
Yeah.
JalenHurts, quite frankly, didn't look like as bad, but it's really hard to qualify concussions, good, bad. The league has gotten itself in trouble in years past because coaches have come out and qualified concussions that way. And, when you talk to experts that deal with brain and head injuries. It's just it's not like this exact science. There's not exact science to it. So I am not surprised by it. That being said, I kind of would be surprised just based upon what I'm hearing. If he wasn't playing Sunday.
I want to put you on the spot for just a moment, if you will. When we start a season, we all have projections on who's going to be a standout, wins and losses, which I hate doing the wins and losses, but everybody wants you to do it. Yeah. I'm going to ask you to give me your top 3 pleasant surprises or wow factors that you covered from this team this season, and why.
Well, I think you have to start with Saquon Barkley. Yep. 2,000 yards in a season, an opportunity had he played in the 17th game to eclipse Eric Dickerson's 40-year-old record. Now, look, I thought he'd have a good year. I'm a Penn State guy. I covered the team, so I've been following his career since before he actually got to Penn State. So I knew what he was capable of. Certainly covering the Eagles and playing the NFC East. And I just felt like he's finally playing behind a top-tier offensive line. So I thought he'd have a good year. I did not expect him to have 2,000 yards, right? The ninth guy in NFL history, and to do what he had done. So that is to me a little bit of a surprise. Looking back upon it, maybe not, but certainly 2,000. Did not expect that. Yep. I guess my second surprise would be Zach Bond, right? Yeah. This guy the Eagles brought in kind of under the radar, free agent signing. You think that. He played some edge in New Orleans. He was mainly a special teams guy. Maybe he can come in and be like that 4th or 5th guy off the bench at that position. But then we started hearing things that, this guy can play a little off-ball linebacker. Spring practice is open, and there he is. He's starting in the spot next to Nakobe Dean. And then you watched him, especially when training camp started. And you're like, wow, this guy can play. All right, maybe they got something here. And then the game started. And he's just playing at such a high level. So he would probably be my second guy, made the Pro Bowl. Certainly may warrant some All-Pro recognition.
Absolutely.
That out soon. So he'd probably be my second guy. If I'm picking a third guy in terms of a surprise or just maybe something in general that was a wow factor, I guess it's got to be the rookie cornerbacks.
Okay.
Come in and play at the level that they have played. Now, look, Quinyon Mitchell was a first-round pick. Cooper DeJean could have been a first-round pick. The Eagles got him in the second round. So it's not like, the Eagles were expecting these guys not to be necessarily ready. But Quinyon stepped in from day one and started and played at a high level and arguably is the defensive rookie of the year. And then Cooper DeJean, he was set back by a hamstring injury during the summer. So that kind of held off things in terms of him eventually winning that slot cornerback spot. But when they put him in after the bye, wow. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's a really smart player. He's physical. He can run with top slot receivers. So, the fact that the Eagles were able to get such great contributions out of 2 rookies in the secondary at positions that, quite frankly, are very difficult to play in this league. I did not expect that to happen.
Wow. You talk about immediate respect. When you talk about Quinyon, look at how many teams didn't even throw his way. Once he got established on his side, I was shocked at the number of teams that didn't even look his way. And, I've heard so many people talk about his technique, his ability to make transitions from one way to the other to stay with these receivers. How surprised were you? I mean, we all scout players and talk about players. How surprised were you that he excelled as quickly as he did?
Well, I did a fair amount of work on him for the draft because I went at the Senior Bowl. We saw him, and there were questions about whether he could match up against top tier receivers because he played at Toledo, right? Whether he could do man press coverage because he did a lot of zone. And at the Senior Bowl, I was there. I mean, I saw it up close and more importantly, I talked to people, real scouts, and they were telling me, yeah, this guy is legit. And just, you knew the way things ended last year in the secondary, not only because James Bradbury had played so poorly, but they just weren't able to replace him. Vontae Maddox got hurt, and it was a mess in the secondary. It wasn't just cornerback, it was safety as well to some extent. So I figured they were going to be hot on him. So, I thought that, and in fact, I predicted the Eagles to draft him because I'd heard they were just on this kid. But like you said, technique-wise, to come in and be as polished as he is. You don't see that very often from that position. Now, he's not perfect, right? He still has to work on his technique. But the fact that he can like flip his hips the way he does and offset what maybe he does make a wrong turn and then be able to close on the ball. There's some things he's still got to work on. He's got to start getting interceptions, quite frankly. Sometimes they're not throwing to you. It's hard to get those interceptions, but he dropped some early, should have been interception opportunities. A couple of them, not his fault. CJ Gardner Johnson stole one from him a couple weeks ago and did the same thing, I think, earlier this season. But he's legit. And God, it's been a long time since the Eagles can say that they drafted a cornerback that has Pro Bowl potential.
You being a Penn Stater, your opinion may be biased, but I must ask you, where were you? Which side of the fence were you on in terms of Saquon going for Eric Dickerson's record or being safe rather than sorry that last game against the Giants?
Yeah, well, I mean, me, Gunner, I'm going to take myself out of it. Okay. I just cover the team, try to be as objective and neutral as possible. I thought it was, to me, though, I thought, it's a no-brainer. You just can't play your guys in a meaningless game. No bearing whatsoever on the playoffs. It wasn't just about Saquon. It's about getting these veterans some rest. I mean, Landon Dickerson, tons of injuries he's playing through. Lane Johnson expressed how much he needed that time off. And if you're going to rest one of those guys, you got to rest them all, right? You can't have Saquon running behind a second-tier offensive line and say, you weren't going to have Jalen out there as well. And I understand this is the Giants' defense that isn't very good. Tanner McKee and a second-unit offense went out there and beat them. But to me, there was just so much to lose and not as much to gain. Nice record, but this isn't about individual awards. This is about winning a Super Bowl, and that's the way it should have been.
You can tell Saquon wanted it, though, because initially when he spoke last week, he gave the good company answer and said a team first. And then all of a sudden, as he kept talking, you could tell he wanted that thing badly, man, because that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, I think if, the circumstances have been different, maybe back in October when he let the young boys eat. Yeah. Right. He let Kenny Gainwell go out there and Will Shipley get some carries. He could have had the record going into the season finale rather than have it hinge on that last game. But yeah, I mean, look, he's a competitor. He had an opportunity to set an all-time record, albeit with an extra game. But the 2K say thing is a silver lining. Yes. More than a silver lining. He's one of 9 guys to have done it, and he did it in 16 games. That's something he'll always have. And you could tell how much it meant to everyone else on that team, especially the offensive line when they accomplished it against the Cowboys.
Go back to early in the season when this team was 2-2. So many people were calling for Nick Sirianni's head on a silver platter. Get him out of here. He stinks. Bleep this, bleep that, Sirianni. And you look at the transformation they went through to get to where they are now. I'm not going to say he had to put his ego aside, but he stepped aside and let his coaches do their thing. How much credit does Sirianni get for what this team has been able to accomplish up to this point, a 14-3 record?
Yeah, he's the head coach, right? I mean, everything falls under his stewardship. Yeah. So he's responsible for everything. That whole narrative about, okay, if you're not responsible for either scheme, what do you do? He runs the team, right? He sets every agenda, the agenda of every day, the schedule, the culture, the messaging. And then, of course, he has ultimate responsibility for the defense. I know he pretty much gives Vic Fangio autonomy over that side of the ball, but he's in those meetings. He's kind of giving his input. He's saying what he wants or what he doesn't want, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I think this has been underreported. I've talked about it in my podcast. We hammered on this a little bit, that when they did switch to a run-heavy offense, there was less of Kellen Moore's offense, a little more of what Nick had brought to the offense, and Brian Johnson, quite frankly, and Shane Steichen in 2021 and 2022. Yeah. And because they went back to a little more of what Jalen really liked to do. There's some of the stuff in the Kellen Moore offense. It just didn't suit him. He didn't like it for whatever the reason. So, hey, let's do some of the stuff that we've done before. We'll just dress it up a little different.
Yeah.
So, and then Nick gets credit for that as well. Is he perfect? No. Are there times decision-making you can question him temperament-wise? I think that's an area that, he has shown some improvement, and then he's had some regression as well.
Yeah.
With the Zach Ertz incident. And I always worry about whether that can get him in trouble. But overall, Nick Sirianni, look at the record. It speaks for itself.
I'm going to ask you about these the coordinators, and I'm going to start with Fangio. You covering this team as well as you do, and you get to talk to these coordinators weekly. What's your impression of Fangio, and how well have you gotten to know him? A lot of times coordinators like to keep their distance from the media, but how well have you gotten an opportunity to know him?
Vic, keeps to himself. He's an old schooler, right? But he's an approachable guy. And, I did get to sit down with him for about an hour before the season. Quite frankly, it was not really much, wasn't to talk much about football. It was to talk about his love of the Phillies and baseball. I did a big story on that. Now you learn a lot about a guy talking about whatever type of topic it may be. And we end up touching on football and the similarities between baseball and football, et cetera. But, I've enjoyed my time covering him because, when he is up there in the podium, it's basically straight and to the point and about as honest as he can be. Now, he's not going to give you everything, but he gives you a little bit, and increasingly in the NFL. And it's just like, I feel like they just try so hard not to give you anything. And I understand that to some extent, but Vic's like the confidence to be like, sure, whatever. You may know what I think about a player, or you may think, about a scheme or this, that, or the other thing. It doesn't ultimately matter. I'm confident enough in my skills as a coordinator to go out there, even if there's some information that I've given that some other coaches haven't given. It's all out there on film. Everybody knows what Vic does. I've enjoyed covering him. He's got the number 1 ranked defense in the league. Yeah. I don't know if enough has been written about what the job that he has done this season.
Kellen Moore, because when I think of Kellen Moore, Dallas offense, Chargers offense, to me, this doesn't look like a Kellen Moore offense.
No.
I hate to use this term, but for lack of better words, I think he's had to eat a little humble pie in terms of changing his ideology when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley standing behind your quarterback and that particular offensive line.
Yeah, you see that a lot with young coaches. Now, look, they brought him in here to run his scheme.
Yep.
And so you'll understand why they're going to, hey, let's go, Jalen. Let's see you do this. And that was what we saw in training camp. The ball was getting out quick.
Yep.
He was getting out quick. I mean, I didn't see Jalen throwing the ball downfield nearly as much as he did the 3 previous seasons. And the season happened, and it just, it wasn't happening for whatever reason. And, there were turnovers, there was interceptions, fumbles, he was missing guys. And look, they said, hey, let's just take a little bit off his shoulders. Let's go back to doing a little bit of what he's more comfortable in. They weren't doing a lot of the play action, naked boot stuff that we saw, quite frankly, Tanner McKee run a bunch of this past week. That's the Kellen Moore offense. That's the way it looked like when he was in Dallas and when he was with the Chargers. But you know what? That happens. That happened in 2021. Nick came in trying to run his scheme, the scheme that they had learned under Frank Reich, and when they were in San Diego, with Philip Rivers.
Oh, Rivers. Okay.
Right. So, I mean, that's the offense they wanted to run here, and it took them a while to figure out. You know what? We're not playing to his strengths, and so he gave it the play calling, and he said, "Hey, let's revolve around the QB +1 run game. Let's get to that. Let's get this run behind this good offensive line." And that's what we're seeing this year. And that's Nick, but that's also Kellen as well as the play caller and as the offensive coordinator.
Did you ever think you lived to see a Jeffrey Lurie team be as run dominant as this particular team is?
No, 2021 they were pretty run dominant.
Close,
dominant, but I mean, this is going to test the theory, right, of whether defense and running the ball can win in today's modern NFL. Now, I saw a statistic earlier today somewhere that in terms of, I think it's like EPA, an advanced analytic, that for the first time in a long time, offenses have had more success running the ball than passing the ball. You're seeing a little bit of a tilt this year, but when you get in the postseason, my concern with this Eagles team is if they get behind in the second half, because if they get ahead, more often than not, they're going to win. They're just going to pound teams.
Right.
Teams don't want this offensive line. They don't want to. They don't want it. That 4-minute drill, they've killed teams doing that. I'm not saying it's going to happen every time.
Yeah.
But if they have to get behind and they have to throw every down, can they do it? Can Jalen do it? That is the question. That's why ultimately you want the Pat Mahomes of the world, right? Pat Mahomes, the Chiefs limped into the playoffs last year.
That's right.
What ended up happening in the postseason? They won a Super Bowl, right? Because you had Patrick Mahomes, you had Andy Reid calling the plays. You still had enough guys there on the offensive side of the ball, but ultimately you had an elite quarterback. So we'll see. We'll see if they can do it. They might not need to, right? If they keep playing this type of defense, if they keep running the ball the way they are, but the defenses that they're playing now are going to be tougher.
When you look at JalenHurts' body of work this year compared to his previous 3 years, do you think he has progressed as a quarterback and a leader? Do you think he's regressed, or do you think basically he's flatlined?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Because like the numbers would say regression, right?
Right.
Especially after that 2022 season where he did it all. Nick Sirianni likes to call him a winner, and quite frankly, everywhere he's been, he's won. So hasn't won the big one, but he's won. So there's an element of that. That's part of the equation here. That's something you have to always take into account. And Jalen, to his credit, has kind of taken a step back a little bit this season, right? He's been okay with being a little more of the game manager, right? He still has to go out there and perform. Like he plays the most important position in sports. So it's like, I don't want to devalue what he has done because he still has to make great throws and he still has to read the defense and he still has to decide, okay, check on this play, run on this, okay, let's go to I have to decide at the snap RPO if I'm going to hand off, pass, or run myself. So, I mean, he's still got to execute this offense and he's still a high-level quarterback. He's still one of the top guys in the league, top 10, 12. I don't know where you want to place him, but he's definitely in there. But, yeah, I mean, I think, like, it's about stacking up seasons, right? He's stacking up seasons, right? Maybe in a few years we'll be able to step back and say, okay, this is what Jalen is.
Sure.
Maybe this is one of those years where it wasn't as good. We'll see how it plays out here in the postseason, but that's a very good question. I want to see a little more before I say whether this is a regression or is just basically who he is.
When you look at the 14 teams that are going to the second season now, how surprised are you that the Eagles team is as healthy as it is going into the playoffs? I mean, that's unheard of. Everybody's missing somebody. Their upcoming opponent, Green Bay, is missing Christian Watson. He's gone with an ACL tear, and they have a few other players that might not play this week. Zaire Alexander out with an injury. Yeah,
that's a bigger loss.
That's a huge loss. So how surprised are you that this team is as healthy as it is?
They've done a great job of maintaining the health of their players over these last 3 years. They've really kind of changed the way they've done things there. I know people have criticized them in terms of like taking the load off the players and training camp. They actually kind of amped it up this year and in season as well, because last year they felt the conditioning wasn't where it needed to be, especially for the big guys. Yeah. So I feel like they feel like not only are they not injured, I feel like they feel the conditioning of guys like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, certainly the guys along the offensive line is where it needs to be. So that's great for them. But yeah, in terms of the injuries, they're about as healthy as they were 2 years ago. And yeah, you're mentioning not only Green Bay, if it gets to the point where they're playing Detroit, that team's been devastated by injuries.
I know.
Their two best defensive linemen are out for the season.
Yeah.
Now they still find a way to win. That is a very talented team. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, that's all. The only guys pretty much BG is like the main guy that that won't play in the postseason.
Yeah. Is Jalen Carter arguably the defensive player of the year? Is he arguably in that conversation? And how heavy is he in that conversation, if so?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay.
I think he's the best defensive player on the team.
Okay.
Everything revolves around him up front, right? Team slide protection to him a bunch.
Yeah.
That frees up other guys for one-on-ones. Smart player, tough, obviously. So what they do up front is based on Jalen, not only in the run game, but what he can do in the pass as a pass rusher. So, but at league MVP, I think there's, it's just so hard when there's so many great edge rushers in the league. Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson for the Bengals had almost 18 sacks this year. But I think he has that capability down the road, Gunner. That talented, if he can just, keep it going, listen to the people inside the building, stay focused, do as they instruct him to do. He's got that kind of talent.
When you look at this matchup against Green Bay, what concerns you the most about the Packers? Of course, last year, they got hot at the right time. They go into Dallas. They blow the Cowboys off the map, a team that had won 16 consecutive home games. This time around, they're kind of limping to the playoffs. They lost their last two games to Minnesota and Chicago. Key players are down and out. But this is a team that's a top 10 offense and top 10 defense as well. So with that said, how cautious, how concerned are you about this Packers team coming into Lincoln Financial Field?
It's a good team. Now, look, there were a lot of people who picked them to go to they were kind of like a sleeper Super Bowl pick or sexy Super Bowl pick after what they did in the postseason. They gave the 49ers a run before they went all the way to the Super Bowl. And I think Jordan Love was a guy that some people thought as a possible MVP candidate. You look at the team, you look at the numbers, you look at the film. There's so much to like about the way this team is coached, the schemes, the balance on both sides. They can do it all. I don't know if they master anything that scares you. I mean, the run game is really good. Everything is kind of built a little bit off that on the offensive side of the ball. It's that Shanahan scheme where you're going to marry the run with the pass. You want to establish the run to some extent to set up the explosive plays down the field. This is the most explosive offense in terms of passing the ball in the NFL, but they're going up against a defense that is the best at limiting explosive passes down the field. So something's going to give. But I think they're dangerous. I think Jordan Love, when he plays at his best, he looks like just a gunslinger who can just make throws all over the field. But then there's just throws and decisions where like, whoa, what was that? So I think that's maybe what the Eagles could hang their hat on in terms of like, okay, we just got to wait for him to make a mistake. But they're going to have to, they can't come out super slow again. And there's a concern with that because that's been a problem this year and because of possible rust with JalenHurts. And if they let them score, if this defense lets them score early and they get behind, then I think there's going to be cause for concern because they can run the ball and put it away if they get it as well. So, I think if the Eagles just need their offense to get into the 20s, I think Fangio can keep this offense in the low 20s, maybe even less than that, because I think they got enough. They can do enough to confuse Love. Now, if you recall, Love barely completed 50% of his passes in that meeting, and he did it kind of blitzing. Love isn't great against the blitz. He's good at scrambling out of possible sacks. But the thing is, Vic doesn't really like the blitz. If he doesn't have the blitz, he's not going to blitz. He can blitz, but it'll be interesting to see how they pressure him and if they can get to him.
Love has only been sacked 11 times in 15 games. When you look at the way the Eagles' defensive front schemes him, is it more important to get to him or more important just to make him uncomfortable and move his feet, not let him set his feet and get in a rhythm?
Mush rush, contain rush, right? I think that's going to be important. Guys got to put their egos aside And I think they've done that at times. That's why the sack numbers aren't up this year.
Yeah.
The secondary's been so good. It's been really kind of they've won from the back front, which is so weird to say for an Eagles defense because it's typically been front back. So they just don't have that dominant pass rusher on the edge, and Jalen has the capabilities inside, but they're always just sliding to him. He's facing so many doubles. Mm-hmm. So just play contained ball and keep him, from scrambling for big gains, or at least getting out of the pocket and making throws. And I think that will go a long way in keeping that offense from going off.
You look at every team in the playoffs, and every team has a go-to receiver, except Green Bay. You don't know who's getting the ball in any given time. They don't have a star receiver. And I think, like you said, if Jordan Love gets in a rhythm, it makes that offense that much more unpredictable because they have 4 receivers minus Christian Watson. They still have 4 receivers that can stretch the field. They have 2 pretty good tight ends, and Jordan Love is going to spray the ball. He's not going to hone in on just one receiver. And as good as this Eagles defense is, I believe discipline is the key in terms of what they're going to be looking at in terms of trying to defend and thwart this Packers offense.
Yeah, when the Watson injury happened, you're like, oh, they lost their big play threat. And he is. He averages over 20 yards a catch, but they do have other guys. So it's not going to hurt them as much as like, okay, if the Eagles lost A.J. Brown, it's not in that category. Obviously, A.J. is better than Christian Watson, but
absolutely
in terms of, what else they have, they go 4 deep at receiver. They have a good tight end. They have guys that can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's willing to throw it to anybody, aside from like Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. I think that's one of the things Jordan Love does in terms of, he's in that category in terms of like just not playing buddy ball with certain guys, whereas like Jalen certainly kind of falls. Now, look, hey, I'm going to play buddy ball with A.J. Brown, but sometimes that can, take away from the offense because Jahan Dotson's open, and you want to spread it around a little more because you want to make the defense have to cover every blade of grass.
Sure. Are you a Tanner McKee guy or Kenny Pickett guy? Kenny's got look at the smile on his face. Which one are you? Which one is better suited to be the backup to JalenHurts on this team? I believe Kenny's going to be one and done here after this season. Are you a Tanner McKee guy?
Yeah, I mean, I like what Tanner did this past game.
Okay.
Talking to guys in the building, keep telling me, he's turning up in practice. They like him. So I think he could be the number 2 in the next off season. I don't know if they're going to make that move. Look, I mean, everyone's kind of hot on Tanner right now, but I think Kenny deserves a lot of credit for what he did against the Cowboys, and get a game with the NFC still on the line. Mm-hmm. He got hurt, took a bad shot again to the ribs, and he played with. Again, he showed a lot of heart in playing with those broken ribs. Took another shot, and he made some good throws. Some big time throws to Devontae Smith. So I give Kenny credit. I think maybe next year, or long term, Tanner's the guy in that spot, and maybe they can. They have Kenny under contract for another year, but there's probably some value for him on the market, as you say. So if they could swing a deal with him, he's got some value, and then keep Tanner as that number 2 guy. I don't know if they want to disrupt the flow and have like Tanner because they have to announce it, right? They have to say who's the number 2. Both are always suited up, but they have to say who's the emergency. I don't know. I think Kenny did enough that they trust him in case something happens, assuming Jalen is playing on Sunday.
Is Howie Roseman the executive of the year?
He's in the conversation again. Howie's won it twice.
Both
times Eagles went to the Super Bowl. Great job this offseason. You got to give him credit. He's got a deep roster. I mean, the best example of that was this Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Second unit offensive defense. Yeah, there were some regulars that played, but they beat a team that was playing most of the starters. Mm-hmm. So that tells you how much depth is on this team. And when guys have gone down, guys have stepped in. Last year, not so much, not the best job that Howie's done. And he's had some misses, but you're always going to have some misses. The Bryce Huff one, I mean, it's amazing to think that the guy that spent the most on in free agency hasn't really done much all the entire season. That's such an important position for them, Bryce
Yeah.
Huff. And you just the jury's still out on Jordan Davis and whether he can be every down guy that you're going to want to give that 5th-year contract to this coming off season. But look at the draft; top 2 guys are delivering. You look at the free agency signing, CJ, little shaky early on, but has really come on in the second half of the season. You look at Zach Bond, Saquon Barkley is maybe the best signing of the entire offseason, free agent signing of the entire offseason. So, Howie's done a very good job. He'll certainly be in the conversation for executive of the year for that might be a record-tying 3rd time.
Wow. Okay. You've been covering this team for 16 years for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Do you ever get tired of doing your job? What do you like most about your job, and what do you say to yourself, man, this is monotonous?
I can't say that publicly.
I knew you were going to say that, but I had to ask you anyway.
No, I mean, a job's a job, but I'm very lucky to do what I do.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to work with the people I work with. I'm very lucky to have as many readers and followers and listeners as I do, and work for a paper like the Inquirer, and to watch football for a living, right? I mean, be outside, it can get hot in training camp. Okay, boo-hoo. It can get cold in the press box sometimes. Boo-hoo. These are all minor inconveniences for being able to do something that I enjoy doing, and still have the opportunity to do it the way I like to do it, which is to kind of dig in, write some in-depth stuff, do narrative series podcast, and not just be social media guy just tweeting things out or whatever it is. The way this profession is going to some extent, I still feel like there are a lot of people out there that want in-depth coverage of their sports teams. So still love it. Is it always lollipops and rainbows? No. It gets to be a grind towards the end of the year. I mean, we work pretty much every day for 6 months, but at this point, for me, I just root for the best story. If they lose Sunday, that'd be a great story. But if they win, then it's okay, I got to cover the Super Bowl anyway. Might as well go to the Super Bowl. That's the best story. Yeah. And so we'll see. This team certainly has it in them, but it's going to be a tougher road than it was 2 years ago.
Speaking of that,
probably 2000, and even though they had a backup quarterback, probably even 2017.
Wow. Okay. Speaking of best stories, what has been your best story on the Birds this season? What do you think? What would you consider your best story that you've done on the Eagles this season?
I like doing that Vic Fangio story before the season. That was a written piece. A lot of the stuff I do now is for the podcast.
Yep.
We did something where we really kind of looked at Saquon Barkley and what kind of teammate he was, and just the responses I got from the players, and Jamal Singleton. I talked for a while. Just gave you kind of a glimpse of what goes on behind the scenes with this kid. I get some grief because I do report sometimes the stuff that team doesn't want out there, players don't want out there, because that's all part of the equation here, right?
Yep.
Not everybody's perfect. But a lot of what I do is the direct opposite of that. And I think in that case, that was the story I enjoyed doing about Saquon, just about A.J. Brown as well. I think one of the most misunderstood players I've ever covered on the Eagles. Just a true leader, bona fide dog, one of the best receivers not only in the league, but in terms of what he does and gives to the guys in the locker room. I just, and I thought we did a very good job at uncovering the Birds of showing that. It just doesn't get talked about enough. So those are two kind of stories I've enjoyed doing. Just off the top of my head.
See, you're like me. You like to separate yourself from the rest in terms of angles, stories you dig up. And a lot of times you've been so great over the years at breaking stories as well. Every time you break a story, I'd be like, doggone it, he beat me to this story again. Do you think, and like you said, because I've been there so many times in my career for as many teams as I've covered, sometimes you have to reveal certain things that an individual player or the organization doesn't get out. But for the most part, I say at least in the 90-plus percentile, you have been fair and objective with this team. Do you think because of your fairness and objectivity, it has brought you grace with the Eagles organization, because you still get inside access to a lot of stuff that people don't have inside access to?
I hope so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, Yeah, do they always love me down there, or do they always love when I come to them and say, "Hey, I got this, and this is what I have, and let's work on this." No, I mean, there's going to be that way, but that's I'm not in this to be loved, right?
Right.
I'm in this to be respected. I always say, like, I don't take myself seriously. I take my job seriously. So maybe I come off as a little bit too taciturn when it comes to the job. But that's because I covered the Eagles like I would the White House. That's just the way I come at it. So to me, this is all kind of like serious, but it is just a game, and I get it. And I understand a lot of reporters, young reporters, and a lot of people in sports media now view it that way, and that's fine. But this is the way I do it, and I feel like I've been pretty successful at doing so. And I feel like, if you look at my readership and listenership and whatever it is, that people want information that they can't get elsewhere. And that's my job. And it could be some revealing something great about a guy behind the scenes that you didn't know anything about, or something that's happening in the locker room about a relationship, or about a scheme change, or about what happened really when Sean Desai was demoted last year, or what really happened between Zach Ertz and Nick Sirianni when what happened? Oh yeah, well that's what happened, right? That's my job to tell you guys what happened. And so I feel like ultimately, if you're just honest and fair is a very key word here. Ultimately, and then it's the truth. If you're reporting the truth, the best version of the truth, there's no hard feelings. There's no way, unless they're not being fair. There should be any issue with me or the reporting that I've done.
I couldn't have said it better myself, my man. Hey, I joke with you because I know I'm older than you, but you're getting old, man. You got a son in college now? I remember when your kids were like knee-high to a grasshopper. Now you got one in college?
Well, 16 years on the beat does that.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I don't know how much longer I can do this, but 16, I can't. Not as long as you. How long for you?
Jeez, I've been covering this game for like well over 4 decades.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I won't even hit that. But
I've covered the Chargers, the Packers, the Steelers, and the Eagles for 25, 26 years. So, I'll make you feel better though. You have a son in college. I have 4 grandkids now.
Yeah.
So you're just over the hill. I'm down in the valley.
See? Yeah, but that's the good stuff, though.
Yeah, because you can give them back.
Exactly. Now you can spoil them and not feel bad about it.
Exactly, my man.
Right. Let the parents handle. Let your kids handle that part of it.
Exactly. Hey, man, I can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes out of your time. I know your day is hectic, and I appreciate you answering my call when I called you, see if I could get you on Gun on One, man. I love your work. You and I have been friends a long time. I have the utmost respect for you, man. And of course, I'll be watching and reading everything you do, as I always have since I've been in this market, man.
Right back at you, Gunner. You're the man.
I appreciate you, brother. Yep. All right. That's going to wrap up this edition of Gun on One, powered by Inside the Birds Network. For Jeff McLane of the Philadelphia Inquirer, who's been on the beat and does it better than anybody else for 16 years. And of course, you can hear him on Uncovering the Birds, his podcast for Odyssey, wherever you get your podcast. I'm Derrick Gunn. Hey, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Oh, real quick, who are you picking in this game? Give me a score and why.
I haven't picked it yet because I got to know about Jalen, but I'm leaning Eagles.
Okay, you're leaning Eagles. All right, that's going to do it for Jeff McLane. I'm Derrick Gunn. We'll talk to you next week. I'm going to predict right now, after the Eagles win, it's not going to be easy, but after the Eagles win over the Green Bay Packers, so long, everybody.